can see by your coat, my friend, you're from the other side.
In a desperate move, one sweltering Florida day, David Crosby sells his Mercedes to his dealer to fuel his spiraling habit. But fate took a dark turn when the guy met a tragic end, and while laying lifeless in his bed, Crosby slipped into the house to reclaim the car's pink slip. Not to get the car back to drive, but to sell it again, feeding the very demons that led him there in the first place. Meanwhile, his bandmates are battling struggles of their own with substance habits, along with money and relationship troubles. It's a far cry from the stage at Woodstock they shared just 13 years earlier when they introduced Crosby, Stills, Nash Young to the world.
Tell them who we are. They don't know. You're just saying hello. Yes.
This is the extraordinary tale of four musicians who collided by chance and together crafted some of the most iconic music of their era. But behind the harmonies lay chaos. Each member's hang-ups testing their bonds at a time of intense societal turmoil set as the backdrop. Their story is Shakespearean in depth, love and betrayal, harmony and discord, hope and despair, triumph and heartbreak, again and again. For over 50 years they rose, fell, and somehow endured. But this journey doesn't end in a warm reunion of old friends reminiscing. Instead, it closes with wounds that never fully healed and a legacy forever marked by both brilliance and turbulence. As the years passed, they each revealed unforgettable moments, both inspiring and disturbing, forged in the relentless pressure cooker of rock and roll fame they once kept buried. This is the story of Crosby, Stills, Nash Young. In 1967, Stephen Stills and Neil Young were playing their protest anthem For What It's Worth to adoring fans, a massive hit at a time when the generational divide was growing by the day. The song struck a nerve and seems to encapsulate the feeling of young people who fear the draft as the Vietnam War is escalating.
I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
But the band was dealing with ego clashes between Stephen Stills and Neil Young. When Young decided he didn't want to play the Monterey Pop Festival just 2 days prior, he left the band scrambling for a replacement. The event marked the first time LA and San Francisco music scenes collided, presenting new commercial and creative opportunities. The Springfield get their Laurel Canyon friend from the Byrds to play instead, David Crosby, who was also having differences with his bandmates.
Knew each other and liked each other, and he said, "Well, you want to, we got to do this gig. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. You got to do this." And I said, "Yeah, I'll sing with you."
Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
The move didn't sit well with the Byrds. Then when it came time for the Byrds set at Monterey, David Crosby gave a political speech about the conspiracy of Kennedy's assassination, which infuriated his bandmates further.
When President Kennedy was killed, he was not killed by one man. He was shot from a number of different directions by different guns. The story has been suppressed. Witnesses have been killed. And this is your country, ladies and gentlemen.
Just 3 days later, David Crosby was no longer a Byrd, and soon afterwards the Buffalo Springfield disbanded. Now musically homeless, Stephen Stills and David Crosby began hanging around Laurel Canyon, debating their next move while jamming with their fellow musicians. Around this time, Graham Nash, who had a successful career with the Hollies, is visiting his new love interest Joni Mitchell at her home in Laurel Canyon. There, the three men start harmonizing on a song, You Don't Have to Cry. Nash said of the harmonies, "Whatever sound Crosby, Stills, Nash Young has was born in 30 seconds. That's how long it took us to harmonize." The Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, and the Hollies' key members suddenly morphed into a three-part harmony that was about to take the music world by storm. It was love at first sound. All three instantly knew they had stumbled upon something special, a new sound that the rest of the world would soon fall head over heels for. Graham Nash headed back to London to break the news to his fellow Hollies bandmates that he had been clashing with over the band's musical direction. Graham recalls how he had been feeling and why the change was so appealing.
When I made the decision to leave the Hollies, three things had happened. One, I was getting frustrated that I was writing songs that I thought were pretty cool and that they didn't want to record. Secondly, they wanted to do an entire album of Bob Dylan songs in a kind of Las Vegas horn section, swing band kind of thing. And the third thing is that I'd actually been befriended by this teddy bear called David Crosby. Cass Elliot said, "Get in the car, I want you to meet somebody."
She brought him over and told me to get him stoned.
On his chest was a lid from a shoebox, and in the lid was a pile of dope.
I had this pullover pot, meaning if you smoked some and you were going someplace, you would pull over and try to remember where you were going. So we laughed all through the afternoon, and I liked him a lot.
He also ends his relationship with his wife at the time, Rose Eccles, who had just inspired the Hollies' hit record earlier that year, Jennifer Eccles. But nonetheless, he went with his instincts and left for Laurel Canyon for good this time. David Crosby, Stephen Stills, and Graham Nash form a band using their newfound 3-part harmony as the foundation for their sound. It was like nothing else being played at the time, as the guitar-dominated sounds of Hendrix, Cream, and The Who ruled the rock airwaves. But they believed in their sound and began writing songs for their debut album. Initially, they flew back to London and auditioned for Apple Records, specifically for George Harrison and Peter Asher. They were turned down. It's hard to say why exactly, but it's worth noting that in 1965, there was a feud between the Beatles and the Hollies over George Harrison's song, If I Needed Someone, which the Hollies covered and Harrison called rubbish. Nash fired back, saying, "Not only do these comments disappoint and hurt us, but we're sick and tired of everything the Beatles say or do being taken as law." Nash went on to comment on the feud again in his 2013 autobiography. "Every English group owed them a huge debt, but I had no intention of kissing their asses. Besides, last I looked, the Hollies were holding down place on the same top 10 as the Beatles, so pardon me if you don't like our effing record, but keep it to yourself, if you please." Nonetheless, they were not signed by Apple, but instead by Ahmet Ertegun of Atlantic. He was a big Buffalo Springfield fan and moved mountains to make it work, as Stills was already signed to Atlantic through his Buffalo Springfield contract. Crosby had been released from his Birds deal with Columbia. Nash, however, was still signed to Epic through the Hollies. Ertegun cut a deal with Clive Davis to essentially trade Nash to Atlantic in exchange for Richie Furay, who was also signed to Atlantic by virtue of Buffalo Springfield and his new band Poco. These guys were traded around like athletes today. Back in Laurel Canyon, they were busy working on their debut album, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. They rehearsed at Stills' former roommate's house, the Monkees' Peter Tork. The band blended folk, country, and rock influences and featured poetic lyrics about relationships, personal events, and broader societal themes.
Looking at the world through the sunset in your eyes, traveling the train through clear Moroccan sky.
One song was Nash's, which he initially brought to his Hollies bandmates, but was rejected. Marrakesh Express, about a song he had taken on a train from Casablanca to Marrakesh.
Can see by your coat, my friend, you're from the other side.
Wooden Ships was written during Vietnam on Crosby's boat in Fort Lauderdale named Mayan. According to the liner notes, the writers Crosby, Stills, and Jefferson Airplane's Paul Kantner imagined ourselves as the few survivors escaping on a boat to create a new civilization. The lyrics depict the horrors confronting the survivors of a nuclear war. A person from one side stumbles upon a person from the other side and asks,
One thing I got to know, can you tell me please? One.
To stay alive, they share purple berries, as a result of which they haven't got sick once. The lyrics beg, silver people on the shoreline, described by David Crosby as guys in radiation suits, to let us be.
6 or 7 weeks now, haven't got sick once. Probably keep
Wooden Ship's dark lyrics are brilliantly juxtaposed against a soft, almost upbeat melody. In Homer's epic poem, The Odyssey, Odysseus says to Achilles, "War is young men dying and old men talking." That harsh reality faced young people at the time, and Wooden Ships embodied that in a detached surrender. Stephen came to where I was singing one night on the West Coast and brought his guitar to the hotel and sang me Sweet Judy Blue Eyes, the whole song. Afterwards, we both cried, and then I said, "Oh, Stephen, it's such a beautiful song, but it's not winning me back." I felt the song was flattering and heartbreaking for both of us. Neither one of us walked away from that relationship relieved. We were both like, whoa, what just happened? Later, the song Helpless Hoping was written by Stills struggling after their breakup. His lyrics combined with acoustic melancholy are a double dose of heartbreak delivered by Stills' masterful musicianship and takes you way down into the depth of his hurt. Their self-titled debut album was released in May 1969, instantly lifting them to stardom. It joined the ranks of albums which were charting a new direction in popular music, the art of the personal story, including Bob Dylan's Nashville Skyline, the Byrds' Sweetheart of the Rodeo, and the band's Music from the Big Pink. It proved influential on many levels to the dominant popular music scene in America for much of the 1970s. The group's emphasis on personal confession in its writing paved the way for the success of the singer-songwriter movement of the early 1970s. Their use of personal events emotionally emphasized in their vocal harmony, as well as the Laurel Canyon ethos that surrounded the group, established an aesthetic for Crosby, Stills, and Nash and a number of acts that came to define the California sound of the ensuing decade, including the Eagles, Jackson Browne, and the 70s Fleetwood Mac lineup. On the cover, the members are left to right, Nash, Stills, and Crosby, the reverse of the order of the album title. The photo was taken by their Laurel Canyon friend and photographer Diltz before they came up with the name for the group. They found an abandoned house with an old battered sofa outside that they thought would be a perfect fit for their image. A few days later, they decided on the name Crosby, Stills, and Nash. To prevent confusion, they went back to the house a day or so later to reshoot the cover in the correct order. But when they got there, they found the house had been demolished. The original vinyl LP was released in a gatefold sleeve that depicted the band members in large fur parkas with a sunset in the background shot in Big Bear, California. But just as they were enjoying the sweet taste of success, a series of events unfold that shock the world and the band to its core. On August 10th, news broke of a horrifying scene with 5 victims, including pregnant actress Sharon Tate, in the hills of Los Angeles. The victims being celebrities in a home many had been to while attending parties by Byrds producer Terry Melcher, along with the word pig written in blood on the door, left the music community of Laurel Canyon paralyzed in fear. The following day, another seemingly ritualistic killing nearby. The events shocked the world and terrified the residents of Laurel Canyon, with some opting to move away, including David Crosby and his girlfriend, Christine Hinton, who decided they would soon move to the Bay Area. Steve and Stills dominated the recording of their debut album, overdubbing all the bass, organ, and lead guitar parts, as well as acoustic guitar of his own songs. So when it was time to promote the album on the road, they needed another musician. They initially approached Steve Winwood, who was already in the early days of Blind Faith. He reportedly would not come out of his room when they went to visit him.
What we really wanted was Steve Winwood, and we just scared Steve, Winwood. He locked himself. We were there. We arrived. Our boots were up to our ankles in mud, and we were a little under the weather, and we scared Steve Winwood to death. He locked himself in his bedroom and wouldn't come out, and we finally looked at each other and said, "Well, I guess he's not coming out," and left. We asked Eric Clapton if he wanted to join the band. He said no. And so Stephen asked me, "Well, what do you think about Neil?"
After Stephen Stills and Eric Clapton declined, Ertegun suggested former Buffalo Springfield member Neil Young. Stills said no initially because of his history of conflict with Young in Buffalo Springfield, but soon saw it as their only real option.
Armin says, "Why don't you get Neil?" Didn't we just go through this?
Neil Young had been trying to make it as a solo artist, but saw the opportunity to expand his appeal to a wider audience.
We had an interview with Neil in Greenwich Village on Bleecker Street. And I went to breakfast with Neil because I was the one that was mainly against it, because I didn't see what we needed from Neil.
When Nash met with Young in Greenwich Village and asked him why they should let him join, Young said, "Have you heard me and Stills play guitar together?" It was settled. CSN was now CSNY.
And by the time I'd finished breakfast with Neil, I would have given him the world. He was unbelievably brilliant, and of course I loved his music.
Crosby, Stills, Nash Young was set to play their first major public gig at the Auditorium Theater in Chicago with Joni Mitchell as their opening act. They mentioned they were going someplace called Woodstock the next day, but they had no idea where it was. When they got there, they started to realize what they had gotten into. What was expected to be an audience of 50,000 had grown to over 400,000 when people showed up and made their way into the festival with or without tickets. The band showed up, but their instruments were nowhere to be found. Stills and bassist Greg Reeves tell of their anxiety waiting backstage with Jimi Hendrix, who got a kick out of this.
Tension mounted as our equipment continued to not arrive.
We had nothing at Woodstock. No instruments. Jimmy was right behind us laughing. May he rest in peace, Hendrix. He was crying, laughing. He had this big Gallo cheap wine bottle. He said, "Want some? Soothe your pain." And he's crying, laughing. He said, "You guys don't worry. We got enough instruments and stuff here. You can use my stuff."
Show business was like that for a brief, shining moment.
I mean, everybody that we really thought was good was there. Hendrix, Airplane, Grateful Dead, the band.
There were cameras filming the performance for a documentary film. Neil Young took exception to the cameras and asked them not to film him, so he is absent from most of the footage.
I was offended by the cameras all over the place because it was a distraction to what we were doing, which was playing the music. So I told them not to do that with me, that not to film me, don't bother, don't come near me, and stay out of the way.
The pressure was intense, with the who's who of rock sitting in the back watching them as they took the stage at 3:30 in the morning after several rain delays. Their 1-hour show at Woodstock Festival in the early morning of August 18, 1969 was baptism by fire. The crowd of industry friends looking on from offstage was intimidating and prompted Stills to comment on their lack of experience in live performances as a band.
The point was that all the people that we really cared about were all standing right behind us.
This is our second gig. This is the second time we've ever played in front of people, man. We're scared shitless.
They opened with Sweet Judy Blue Eyes and mesmerized the crowd with each song. Their performance catapulted them to stardom and was immortalized in the Woodstock documentary. Their hit song, written by Joni Mitchell, memorializing Woodstock, would become the song most associated with the festival. After Woodstock, they headed straight into the studio to record their most celebrated work, their sophomore album Deja Vu. CSNY appeared in another prominent festival that year, the Big Sur Folk Festival, in which an audience member, possibly having a bad psychedelic experience, starts heckling CSNY, calling them sellouts, which leads Stephen Stills to confront him. A shoving match ensues quickly and luckily is broken up by Stills' friends.
So when somebody gets up and freaks out like that, it kind of strikes a nerve, and you end up right back in that old trap. And where that guy is at is in that same trap, and that's getting mad about something. And that ain't, nothing, and I had some guys around to love me out of it, and I was lucky.
Then, in late September, tragedy strikes. David Crosby's girlfriend, Christine Hinton, dies in a car crash. Hinton was driving Crosby's VW bus to take their cats to the veterinarian. The accident occurred on September 30th, 1969 in Novato, just days after they moved to the San Francisco Bay Area after the August Manson murders that shocked the tight-knit Laurel Canyon community. Her death had a profound impact on Crosby and is often cited as a major factor in his downward spiral. They were in the studio recording their second album, Deja Vu, at this point. During the sessions, Crosby would break down and cry due to the recent death of his girlfriend, telling Crawdaddy in 1974, "I was not at my best as a functioning person, completely unable to deal with it all." Nash stated to Music Radar, "The mood was different from our first album, which was recorded while the band members were in relationships, and by the second, Joni and I had split up, Stephen and Judy had split up, and Christina had just been killed. It was all dark." They all admit to a substance habit that fueled fiery clashes.
I can't sing it up back room because you can't hear me. And so, because you can't hear me, I sing louder, and because I sing louder, I push harder, and because I push harder, I got no throat.
Yeah.
I can't do it, man. To be fair to you guys, I should shut up until the Greek Theatre, or whenever the first gig is. Because I know I can step in and put my part in, but we can't get a blend that way.
No, we can't get a blend that way, and not only that, but
That's
we can't rehearse it so that it all makes sense together. See, man, they gotta be, I mean, like Dallas, and they don't play just to the track, they listen to the vocal, man. You know he's conscious of the vocal.
What you've got to do, man, is play acoustic now, and we'll try and get a big place as soon as we can.
David and I have been sat here for at least half an hour because we were told that we were going to play acoustic guitars right here.
Right.
So where's Stephen?
With the band reeling from each member's loss, they begin having disputes in the studio. They start nitpicking and critiquing each other.
I'm not going to cop out an inch to fear. And you walked out 2 fucking days in a row, you fucking hypocrite. You pissed me off.
Let's do it again.
I couldn't follow that.
This time I will try to sing. I promise.
They fired their bass player and drummer in heated disputes. Bassist Greg Reeves went with Young to help him make After the Gold Rush that he was working on simultaneously. Woodstock was one of the few Deja Vu tracks Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young all performed their parts in the same session. Almost Cut My Hair encapsulates the notion of long hair as a freak flag. Crosby's song has been credited with popularizing the idea of long hair as a deliberate and visible symbol of the wearer's affiliation with a counterculture and opposition to establishment values. Crosby himself stated, "It was the most juvenile set of lyrics I've ever written, but it has a certain emotional impact, there's no question about that." Our House was written by Nash as an ode to the countercultural domestic bliss he was living with Joni Mitchell in Laurel Canyon, depicting a cozy day when they had come home after being out to breakfast and stopping by an antique shop where Mitchell picked up a vase for their home. Teach Your Children is a song written by Graham Nash in 1968 when he was a member of the Hollies. Stills made Nash change Teach Your Children, and it became a hit with a smooth country-flavored ballad. Graham tells Goldmine, "You never know how you're doing. You write a song like Teach Your Children and figure, well, that's a pretty little song, but I must tell you, the first time I ever played it for Stephen Stills after I finished the song, he looked at me and said, 'That's a really good song. Don't ever play it like that again. You sound like Henry VIII. He played the song back to me with that beautiful right-hand picking style that Stephen is so well known for, and obviously he turned my Henry VIII song into something special.'" Grateful Dead guitarist Jerry Garcia played a pedal steel guitar on Teach Your Children, and former Love and Spoonful's John Sebastian plays harmonica. Garcia had made a deal that in return for his playing steel guitar on Teach Your Children, CSNY would help members of the Grateful Dead improve their vocal harmony for their upcoming albums Working Man's Dead and American Beauty. Now that's a deal. Session drummer Dallas Taylor recalls the origins of Carry On. The song was written in the middle of Deja Vu sessions when Nash told Stephen they didn't have an opener for the album. It was something of a message to the group since it had become a real struggle to keep the band together at that point. Stephen combined 2 unfinished songs and stuck them into a jam we had out in the studio a few nights before, me on drums and Stephen on a Hammond B3 organ. While recording the album, the band got an invitation to play at the upcoming concert in Northern California on December 6, 1969, being headlined by the Rolling Stones, the Altamont free concert, which resulted in tragic death of audience members. Security for the event, the Hells Angels, became aggressive after the crowd accidentally knocked down one of their motorcycles. Dozens of people were hurt, including Jefferson Airplane's Marty Balin, who was knocked unconscious. The Grateful Dead left the venue early due to concerns for their safety. During Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young's set, Stills was reportedly to be stabbed in the leg by a Hell's Angel with a sharpened bicycle spoke. By the time the Rolling Stones took the stage in the early evening, the mood had taken a decidedly ugly turn, as numerous fights erupted between the Angels and crowd members and within the crowd itself. At the band's request, the performance was not included in the subsequent film Give Me Shelter in 1970. Back in the studio while making the album, the band's dynamic was often interrupted by Neil Young wanting to work alone. He would go off on his own and write his songs and then come back and have the others sing on the songs. Crosby says of Young that when he joins a band, he doesn't really join a band, making his own tracks on his own alone. Crosby said they sang on Young's tracks after the fact, which he found to be snotty, but they were good. Nash says Young didn't perform on any of his songs, including Teach Your Children and Our House, but says it didn't bother him as they were decent records. Stephen Stills said of making Deja Vu, getting that second album out of us was like pulling teeth. There was song after song that didn't make it. Upon its release in March 1970, the album made it to Billboard 100's #1 spot, staying on the charts for 97 weeks. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young disbanded to do solo albums. Woodstock, written by Joni Mitchell, was their biggest hit off the album in 1970. During the tour to promote the album, tensions ran high, culminating in an extended solo by Stephen Stills without the consent of the other band members at the Fillmore East when he was informed that Bob Dylan was in the audience. Young was seriously upset about Stills' substance habit and behavior. Nash, Crosby, and Young called off the tour in Chicago. They took the first flight out and didn't tell Stills. He only found out when he came back for the show. What can you do with someone who's blasted out of his skull, writes Nash. They lost $7 million that would have been made from that tour. Neil Young and David Crosby were staying at a house in the Bay Area when reports of the Kent State shootings arrived. David Crosby showed a Time magazine cover to Young that covered the story, inspiring him to write the protest song Ohio. Recorded and rush released weeks later, it peaked at number 14 in August 1970, providing another top 20 hit for the group. Their previously recorded song Teach Your Children was still climbing the charts and at number 5 when the group insisted that it be rushed to release. In 1970, Bill Graham referred to Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young as the American Beatles.
Crosby came up and he had the magazine with the Kent State killings cover on it. And I'd heard it on the news, but Crosby always has a way of bringing things into focus. That's what woke me up to, that there was something going on there that I had some thoughts about.
When things calmed down, Stills invited Nash to sing on his first solo album, the one that would produce Love the One You're With. At the session, Nash made a date with backup singer Rita Coolidge, but Stills also liked her and called and canceled in Nash's name, taking her out instead. Coolidge was with Stills for all of a couple weeks before Nash maneuvered himself back in the picture. When Nash broke the news that Coolidge was now with him, Stills spat in his face. Nash said he still isn't sure that Stills has forgiven him to this day. Between September 1970 and May 1971, each of the members released high-profile solo albums. You can imagine the anxiety and competition between them to see whose album would fare best with audiences. Young's After the Gold Rush in September 1970, which peaked at number 8 and included his top 40 solo hit, Only Love Can Break Your Heart. Stills' eponymous debut in November 1970, Crosby's If I Could Only Remember My Name in February 1971, and Nash's Songs for Beginners in May 1971. Although all 4 LPs placed in the top 15 on Billboard 200, Stills' entry included 2 top 40 hits, Love the One You're With and Sit Yourself Down. Although they continued to collaborate in various projects, the 4 members did not come back together in earnest until their 1974 reunion tour. 1972 proved to be another fruitful year for all band members in their solo or duo efforts. Young achieved solo superstardom with the chart-topping album Harvest and 2 top 40 singles, the number 1 hit Heart of Gold and Old Man.
I wanna give.
Stills joined with former Bird Chris Hillman to form the band Manassas, releasing a self-titled double album. Nash and Crosby joined forces with touring that was so successful and pleasant for them, they recorded and released a duo album, Graham Nash, David Crosby, which eclipsed their recent solo efforts.
David and I knew that we had a musical link, and we always have and always will have.
There's probably nobody currently that sings harmony the way Nash and I do, or can.
In 1973, the band convened to rehearse another album, but the bickering reemerged and they shelved the idea, going their separate ways until 1974. Then they announced their reunion tour, embarking on a 2-month, 31-date tour. And oh boy, did things get out of hand, and they paid the price in many ways. Opening acts consisted of well-known performers including Joni Mitchell, Santana, the band, and Beach Boys. And later, a photo would emerge that shows a surprise guest who joined them on stage one night, Jimmy Page. He joined them on stage for a reported 3-hour jam session at a restaurant in London after their Wembley Stadium show. Nash later recalled that the tour made just over $12 million, which of course was a lot of money in those days. We all got less than $500,000 each. It was obvious that between Bill Graham, the promoters, and a bunch of others, they all had a good time, let's just put it that way. According to road manager Chris O'Dell, one time they spilled a powder on the carpet. They just got down on the floor and quickly tried to recover it. I just went, oh my God, this is so weird. I've never seen anything like it. They probably don't remember that. Stills was apparently so far gone, he started to believe that he was on missions with the U.S. Marines in Vietnam. At this point, he was signing autographs, Stephen Stills, U.S. Marine Corps. Graham Nash started taking strong prescription painkillers. I call them I don't give an SHIT pills. Someone could have told me, hey, your leg's on fire. I would have been like, I don't care, man. We were just up all night. It was insane and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. Although each member performed new songs that later appeared on solo or duo studio releases, Young premiered more than a dozen songs, including several from On the Beach, which was released during the tour, in one of the most creatively fertile phases of his career. Young isolated himself from the group, traveling separately in an RV with his son and entourage. He later asserted to biographer Jimmy McDowell, "The tour was disappointing to me. I think CSN really blew it. They hadn't made an album and they didn't have any songs. How could they just stop like that?" They opted at the time not to release any recordings of the tour for an album, with Nash maintaining the main feeling at the end of the tour was that we weren't as good as we could have been. Still, after the tour raked in $12 million, the four musicians only got $300,000 each. The band had picked up the tab for the decadence. We fell for the rock and roll BS in a big way, Nash concludes. Eventually they met at Record Plant in Sausalito to work on a follow-up to Deja Vu. With renewed tensions, Neil Young soon left again, following a heated argument. The other three attempted to carry on, with Stills getting so angry at one point he destroyed the master of Wind Over Water with a razor blade after Crosby and Nash objected to a harmony part on Stills' Guardian Angel. Even though Stills characterized the incident as a joke, the sessions promptly dissolved. Shortly after, Crosby and Nash signed a separate contract with ABC Records and began to tour regularly again, playing a more intimate array of sports arenas, outdoor festivals, and theaters. Throughout the mid-70s, Crosby and Nash also lent their harmonies to a range of recordings, including James Taylor's Mexico, Joni Mitchell's Free Man in Paris, and Elton John's Blue Moves. Following the lead of Crosby and Nash, Stills and Young briefly united for a one-off album and tour credited to the Stills-Young Band, Long May You Run, in 1976. As Stills and Young embarked on a tour to promote the album in the summer of 1976, the old tensions between the pair resurfaced. Stills insisted that professional studio musicians back them rather than Young's preferred Crazy Horse. After a July 20th, 1976 show in Columbia, South Carolina, Young's bus took a different direction from Stills, waiting at their next stop in Atlanta. Stills received a telegram, "Dear Stephen, funny how things that start spontaneously end that way. Eat a peach, Neil." It was now the third time that Neil Young flaked on Stephen Stills in a big way. Young's management claimed that he was under doctor's orders to rest and recover from an apparent throat infection. Stills was contractually bound to finish the tour alone.
Neil's sense of humor, it certainly wasn't. I certainly knew him too well to let him hurt my feelings like that with a little bit of verbal jousting.
I left the tour in the middle of the tour And there was something inherent, something was wrong with the whole thing. And it wasn't working. The balance was off in some way, so I bailed on it.
Neil got frustrated, and then he got sick, and he said, "Well, that's it, I'm off." And he's got more nerve than I do. I can't just bolt like that.
This pattern in Young had to be difficult to deal with, and you have to give Stills credit for taking it all in stride. I'm sure many would not have been so forgiving. That old saying, "A man is only as good as his word," comes to mind. Later in 1976, Stephen Stills approached Crosby and Nash during a performance at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles, setting the stage for a reunion without Young. Less than a year after reforming, Crosby, Stills, and Nash released CSN, recorded in Miami throughout late 1976 and early 1977. The album exemplified the stylized soft rock ethos of the era and contained the band's highest charting single, Nash's Just a Song Before I Go. The album peaked at number 2 on the Billboard chart in the summer of '77 during a 33-week stay, remaining at that position for the month of August behind Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. After successful arena tours in '77 and '78, further work as the group was complicated by Crosby's substance dependency. Nash determined that Crosby was not in any shape to participate after he stopped a jam session because his pipe had fallen off an amp and broken. Stills and Nash convened in 1980 through 81 to record Daylight Again, a self-funded duo. However, their relationship was still strained from the Rita Coolidge love triangle. Atlantic Records executives refused to reimburse their expenses or release the LP until Crosby was reinstated. With a forced hand, Crosby returned and contributed Delta, his last original composition for several years. However, Nash and Stills' instincts about Crosby were correct. Despite Crosby's condition and the height of the new wave dominating the airwaves, Daylight Again contained 2 hits, including Nash's Wasted on the Way and Stills' Southern Cross.
We have made a lot of good music, I'm not denying that, but we have wasted a lot of time. We have wasted a lot of love, and we have wasted a lot of life.
But on the midnight watch I realized why twice you ran away.
Which brings us back to the beginning, when Crosby found himself breaking into a house to steal back his Mercedes with a dead man lying in the bed, a story reported in Nash's autobiography relayed to him by Crosby. His fall from the height of his fame was long and hard. No one could have imagined that the man singing harmonies on stage in 1969 would be in such a dire situation just 13 years later. Despite renewed success, the bottom soon fell out for David Crosby, who was arrested and jailed on drug and weapons charges in Texas in May 1982. Crosby was sentenced to 2 terms, but the conviction was overturned. Arrested several more times, he failed to show up for court, becoming a fugitive. He finally turned himself in to the authorities in December 1985. He spent 8 months in a Texas prison.
Roll superstar is arrested on fugitive charges in West Palm Beach. David Crosby, formerly of the group Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, turned himself into FBI agents and was arrested by West Palm Beach police. He's been a fugitive since failing to appear for a Texas bond hearing in Dallas last month. Texas authorities were trying to revoke an appeal bond after Crosby was arrested on drug and weapons charges in California. That arrest came while the rock star was appealing a Dallas drug conviction. Crosby's only comment to reporters on being led to the Palm Beach County Jail today, "Wish me luck."
And in fact, it did end up being his luck. Jail seemed to do the trick. He later reported that he wrote to the judge who sentenced him, telling him that he saved his life by putting him in jail. David Crosby married his wife Jan in 1987, citing her for helping his long recovery. Based on a promise he made to Crosby, should he clean himself up, Young agreed to rejoin the trio in the studio upon Crosby's release from prison for American Dream in 1988. During the recording, Crosby found out that his liver was failing him and he needed a transplant, which he eventually received. He cited Phil Collins as helping him through it in many ways. Then, true to form, Young refused to support the album with a CSNY tour. Although they did produce a video for Young's title song single, wherein each member played a character loosely based on certain aspects of their personalities and public image. The band continued to release albums and tour, captivating both a new generation of intrigued listeners and their longtime fans. With their legendary status cemented, their sold-out shows became a massive financial success. After they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1997, they set out on more tours and released several box sets. CSN convened with producer Rick Rubin to record a projected covers album, tentatively titled Songs We Wish We'd Written, for Sony Music in 2010. 7 songs were completed before the dissolution of the sessions due to the increasingly acrimonious relationship with Rubin. Crosby perceived Rubin as a disruptive, autocratic figure in the creative process. Nash said that CSN sessions with Rubin were difficult because it's hard to tell a band what to do after almost 50 years of making records. He said, "You can suggest anything you want, but you can't tell us what to do," stating that the sessions were irritable from the start. By 2012, CSN had completed 5 self-produced re-recordings in anticipation of a potential rights dispute over the Rubin sessions with Sony. In a September 2014 interview with the Idaho Statesman, Crosby dispelled rumors of another CSNY tour, citing Neil Young's general unwillingness and lack of financial incentive to perform with the ensemble, before characterizing Neil Young's new partner Daryl Hannah as a purely poisonous predator. Crosby had apparently been upset with Young that he left his marriage of 36 years for the younger actress. Young and Hannah began dating in 2014. The comment was seen as unforgivable to Neil Young, and he never spoke to Crosby again, despite Crosby's repeated public apologies, including on Howard Stern's show, saying, "I'm screwed up way worse than that girl. Where do I get off criticizing her? She's making Neil happy. I love Neil and I want him happy. And Daryl, if you're out there, I apologize. Where do I get off criticizing you?" While introducing a song during a solo performance at the Philadelphia Academy of Music in October 2014, Young announced that CSNY will never tour again, but I love those guys. Neil Young married Daryl Hannah in August 2018. His ex-wife Peggy died on January 1st, 2019, just months after their wedding. Graham Nash announced on March 6, 2016, following his divorce from his wife of 38 years, in which he also left her for another woman, that Crosby, Stills, and Nash would never perform again because of his recent estrangement from Crosby over remarks about Neil Young's relationship, as well as other things he refused to comment on.
Would you like to talk to him?
No, I'm not interested.
And if he reaches out to you?
He can try all he wants. It's a little fucking late.
It really, you're angry?
Yeah, I'm angry. He tore the heart out of CSN and CSNY in the space of a few months.
Because of his criticism?
Because he's not a really great person. He talks a good story.
What I read, and I don't know if it's true, it's because of him criticizing Neil Young's new girlfriend. Is it true or not?
That's how it started.
That's how it started. And then afterwards, okay.
That's how he tore the heart out of CSNY.
And when did he, and how did he tore the heart out?
I'm not going to tell you.
Nash remarried in April 2019, and his ex-wife died of cancer in September of 2020. In summer of 2016, Neil Young told Rolling Stone that he wouldn't rule out future collaborations with the trio. According to Nash in a follow-up interview, "Well, he's right, you never know. There's been times when I've been so pissed at us all for wasting time and not getting on with the job that I wouldn't talk to any of them. But if Crosby came to me and played me 4 songs that knocked me off my ass, what the F am I supposed to do as a musician, no matter how pissed we are at each other?" Neil echoed the sentiment in 2017. "I think CSNY has every chance of getting together again. I'm not against it. There's been a lot of bad things happening among us, and a lot of things have to be settled. But that's what brothers and families are all about. We'll see what happens. I'm open. I don't think I'm a major obstacle." Crosby said shortly after that Young is a hugely talented guy and a prospective reunion would be fine with me. But just as it seemed a reconciliation was possible, the tone changes. In a May 2021 interview, Nash said, "When that silver thread that connects a band gets broken, it's very difficult to glue the ends back together." Crosby then tells The Guardian in September 2021, when asked if there's been any reconciliation, "No, and I don't expect there to be. The petty-ass BS that goes on between us people." He stops himself. "Neil's got a genuine beef. I did say something bad about his girlfriend. I said I thought she was a predator. Okay, he can be mad at me. That's all right. Graham just changed from the guy I thought he was, my best friend, to being a guy that's definitely my enemy, so I don't see any future there at all." Crosby said of Neil, "Well, he's probably the most self-centered, self-obsessed, selfish person I know. He only thinks about Neil, period. That's the only person he'll ever consider, ever." Crosby also made his feelings known about the music industry and how hard it was for musicians to earn a living. He says streaming music is almost impossible to make money from records. "Believe me, man, it's going to hurt the music business very badly in the long run if you shut the door on all the young people who are trying to become musicians. The music industry is making a terrible mistake. They are stealing and they are thieves." In 2021, Crosby sold his recorded music and publishing rights. "I had no choice, man. I can't make a living. I'm not being paid for the records." On January 18, 2023, David Crosby died at age 81. He never had a chance to reconcile with Neil Young or Graham Nash, although he did occasionally speak to Stephen Stills. Crosby had been married to his wife Jan for 36 years, citing her as the reason for his sobriety and recovery. In the end, CSNY all seemed to have good intentions, with a pattern of being restless and outspoken at the expense of others, affecting their professional and personal lives, while surviving in an industry that would bring out the worst in anybody, all while under a microscope, proving that we're all our own worst enemies. Despite decades of conflict, creative clashes, and personal betrayals, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young created music that transcended their differences. Their story, equal parts brilliance and dysfunction, remains one of rock's most compelling sagas. When David Crosby passed away in 2023, the remaining members put aside grievances to honor him. In the end, their legacy isn't defined by the petty feuds that kept them apart, but by the music that will forever keep them together in the hearts and music collections of their fans.
Love is coming to us all.